Indonesia has now confirmed its first cases of the virus, with 2 people who had come into contact with a foreign traveller testing positive. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Anne Barker joins us now from Jakarta. Anne, good to talk to you. What do we know about these 2 confirmed cases?
Bev, we're talking about a mother and daughter in southern Jakarta at Depok, about an hour south of the city here. Both women had a visitor from Malaysia, a Japanese woman who came to visit them in mid-February. Now, they went dancing together one night. She stayed with them. They felt sick about 2 days later, on the same day that the Japanese woman went back to Malaysia, where she lives. And these women became very ill with a fever, with a cough. They had 10 days of serious illness and went to hospital. Only 3 days ago, they were actually told by this woman that she had been diagnosed in Malaysia with the coronavirus. They were then checked and confirmed, and this was announced only today by the President Joko Widodo. Now, the Indonesian authorities here in Jakarta are actually testing, or they're checking on 71 staff in the hospital for a start that these women were at. They've asked a lot of those staff to isolate themselves for 14 days. They're also tracking friends, family, neighbours, anyone these women came in contact with in the days before they went to hospital. And that's, of course, a big concern.
It is such a populous country. There had been the sense that perhaps they were playing down the possibility of these cases. Are they prepared for an outbreak?
Well, look, the government today is using this latest case, saying that this is proof that Indonesia does know how to test for the virus. They confirm these women do have the coronavirus, and that they have the capacity, that they're meeting the standards that the World Health Organization sets. But there have been constant questions in the last month, even more than a month. There have been a couple of people who died of pneumonia. The tests proved that they were negative. There's only been about 300 or so tests that have been done in Indonesia in the last few weeks, compared to thousands, for example, in South Korea. So there have been numerous questions about why more testing hasn't been done, whether the kits are adequate, even suggestions that they weren't kept at the right temperature, which perhaps makes them ineffective. Just in the last few days, we've also heard that 3 people have returned to Singapore from Batam in the Riau Islands, part of Indonesia, who were then diagnosed with coronavirus. Again, there's been very little said about whether there are efforts to track these people who they met in Batam, whether those people need to be tested or quarantined. So there's a lot of possible cases that don't seem to be investigated properly, and that leaves a lot of fear and scepticism in the eyes of many Indonesians.
And particularly too because tourism is such a big part of the economy. What steps are being taken to try and contain any spread, given, say, for example, Bali, where there are so many travellers coming from all parts of the world?
Well, that's right. I mean, this was the area people were fearful of the most. You know, there are 2 million Chinese tourists who come to Indonesia each year. 1.2 million of them go to Bali. Now, it took some weeks before Indonesia suspended flights from China, for example. There were 5,000 Chinese who were effectively stranded in Bali after the coronavirus epidemic became known. So there were a lot of questions about whether it was spreading undetected in Bali. There was a Japanese tourist who returned from Bali after being ill. The questions were whether that tourist had become ill in Bali. Again, there was relatively little investigation that the public knew about as to whether that person did become ill in Bali. Just last week, there were people returning from Iran, one to Australia, one to New Zealand, who had transited through Bali, and we were told that one of those passengers had indeed gone into Bali airport, come into contact with Indonesian staff, but no real word on what was being done to track whether those people in the airport had been made ill as well, or whether they should quarantine themselves. So, yes, relatively little done to protect places like Bali, and a lot more questions about whether Indonesia is adequately prepared to deal with this coronavirus epidemic or pandemic.
And Barker in Jakarta, thank you.